Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. A major winter storm has hit the plains and the mid Atlantic part of the United States. Joining us to talk about the snowfall and the ice and what it means for people living in those states is Dan DePodwin. He is AccuWeather's senior director of forecasting operations. He's coming to us from State College, Pennsylvania. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you too, Maggie.
Okay, let's just start with an overview. I'm in New York. Snow is falling, which makes me happy, but I don't think everyone in the US is equally happy. Where is snow falling and how serious is it?
So the snow has hit a large swath of the country. Looking at the radar here, this is early on Monday afternoon, and heavy snow still falling across Ohio, and then a batch has just moved out of Washington, D.C. As you mentioned in New York City, this is not really New York City snowstorm. Some snow in the air, some slick spots on sidewalks and some secondary roads, but not a big issue in the New York City area. But that the slippery conditions really pick up as you head farther south and west down towards Washington, D.C. And looking at snowfall totals, most of this has fallen. There's still a bit more, maybe a few more inches to go this afternoon and through the evening hours, but you can see a pretty large swath here of 6 to 12 inches of snow, which is a very impressive snowfall event for our nation's capital, along with places up close to Baltimore, even out into the Jersey coastline. The beaches there, the Jersey Shore just has about 6 inches of snow too. So, and this has been an impressive storm, not just for the Mid-Atlantic here today on Monday, but in places farther west where they've picked up to a foot of snow in places like Kansas, even over a foot of snow in Kansas on Sunday, and that caused all sorts of travel shutdowns across that region of the plains into the Midwest. So it's been an impactful snow event for many people, and there's also been other hazards from the storm as well, such as ice.
I was just about to ask, so you have a foot of snowfall in some places and then you have ice. How bad is the ice in certain parts of the country?
Yeah, the ice is mostly done, which is good news, but that has led to significant power outages, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of customers without power. The area in red here is where the power outages have been the worst in parts of most of Kentucky here into southern Missouri, where there was between a half and three-quarters of an inch of freezing rain accumulating, so ice accumulating on trees and power lines. That's plenty of ice to cause significant tree damage in some places. And the concern here is that the places that have power being out are expected to be near or below freezing for the next several days through much of this week. AccuWeather real field temperatures here through this is just a snapshot of Wednesday morning. You can see the AccuWeather real field temperatures near zero or even below zero across a lot of the Midwest. So it's going to feel very cold. So definitely hats and gloves needed if you're outside for any period of time, a very good jacket or multiple layers. It's not going to be great to be outside. And with power being out, we're concerned about the fact that some places won't have heat for several days.
And of course, if the temperature is below freezing, that will make it harder for that ice to melt. Let's go back to those temperatures. Can you break down which region will see which temperatures and when?
Sure. So I'll go back to the well, actually, I'll go to this for a second here, where we talk about sort of this prolonged chilly pattern across the U.S. Most of these areas in the eastern half of the country are not expected to see record-setting low temperatures or cold temperatures, but there's going to be a week period or so of well below historical average temperatures, and that's what we see here in this blue, where places like in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, these places in the Midwest can see high temperatures in the teens and low 20s, low temperatures at night near or just below zero. And with that wind at times, it'll feel like it's below zero. So it's going to be a chilly time period, again, with snow and ice on the ground and a swath from Kansas through Missouri into Illinois, Indiana, and along the Ohio River there. So expecting a chilly week, really the entire week. And the other thing to pay attention to is the southern extent. You can see this blue that dips down south because the Jetstream has dipped that far south, bringing that colder air south from Canada. We expect the southeastern United States to experience a freeze. This happens most winters, but it's certainly a big deal when it does happen because it doesn't happen very often most winters. So basically from Interstate 10 on northward, we expect a freeze this week. In some places, multiple mornings of below 32 degrees temperatures, and even a couple areas in northern Florida could receive a freeze this week, although widespread damage to crops is not expected in Florida. Certainly a cold week in the southeast, colder than the week that is average and enough where we definitely need to be bundling up well when you're out at the bus stop with your children, and just know that it's going to be a chilly week with temperatures in the 30s and 40s for many folks.
colder in the South, colder in the Midwest, colder even on the Atlantic area. You mentioned the jet stream and that map right there. So are we experiencing these temperatures because of air that's getting pushed into the US from Canada?
Yeah, we are. So this happens basically most winters where you have a weather pattern. Um, a lot of the weather pattern across the world is at least influenced somewhat, if not significantly, by where the jet stream is. And the polar jet stream in the winter, it comes farther south, and that's why we see intrusions of colder air into the United States. And in this case, you see this jet here in this white line. This is what we call a trough, so a dip in the jet stream, and that has allowed for colder air that usually resides in Canada and up into the Arctic to come south into the United States. And this pattern is sort of has stuck around for a few days. It will continue to linger through the rest of this week, and that's why we see this persistent flow of cold air coming into the U.S. in the eastern half of the country. It stays pretty mild out in the west, usually where there's cold, somewhere there's warm air somewhere else. In this case, the western U.S. is on the warmer side through much of this week.
Let's talk about some of the disruptions. So you mentioned ice, you mentioned snow. There are downed power lines in some parts of the country, travel disruptions elsewhere. What do the folks watching need to know about how this storm might affect their lives?
So it's going to be a poor day of travel in much of the Northeast and or I guess primarily the mid-Atlantic here. Again, most of the snow has already fallen here, but roads are still a mess through Monday. And also, just because it stopped snowing heavily in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, there is still a secondary batch of snow that's across Ohio here that's going to move east and off the mid-Atlantic coast on Monday evening. So do expect another 3 to 4 hour period of moderate snowfall that can create further slippery conditions for travelers this evening across the mid-Atlantic. So that's certainly something to be concerned about, just as giving yourself plenty of extra time if you're traveling. If you can stay home today, certainly a good day to do that. And then the cold following the storm will make the ice and snow difficult to melt in a lot of places. So it may take some time for road crews in parts of Kentucky, Southern Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia to clear roads because of the fact that there's a combination of sleet and freezing rain and snow. And that combination of all different precipitation types can be difficult to get off the roads. So certainly plenty of time if you travel. If you have a generator, uh, make sure you know how to use a generator and make sure it's not ventilating into your home if you do lose power. Also, obviously have plenty of different supplies. If you do have to travel, make sure you have things in your car, such as blankets and water, should you get stuck on a road somewhere. Definitely thinking ahead in these situations is always good to be prepared for what could happen, even though it's not likely to happen. Certainly being prepared is important.
Being prepared is always important. And to that point, we're experiencing a storm right now. You mentioned some of the sustained cold, but is there another storm following on the footsteps of the one we're currently witnessing?
There is, and we're very concerned about an area farther south, even of significant snow and ice in places that don't always get snow and ice every winter. And when they do, there's usually travel chaos in many places, like Texas, for instance, where we think there's going to be a pretty impressive area of moderate to potentially heavy snow starting late Wednesday night into the day on Thursday, from Odessa, the Midland area, up through Dallas, maybe even including Little Rock. And just south of that, it could be a pretty impressive swath of ice. And that's going to cause slippery travel, could be very dangerous travel, in fact, places perhaps even as far south as Austin, up towards Shreveport, Jackson, Mississippi, all could be dealing with a mix of snow and ice come Thursday and Thursday night. There's a big college football playoff game in Dallas, so that's a closed stadium, but there will be a lot of travelers going to the game on Friday. So there's going to be significant travel trouble getting to that playoff game if folks are traveling into Dallas on Thursday. And then this is going to move to the Northeast, and we're going to watch for snow to spread across the Tennessee and Ohio valleys here on Friday. And we'll have to see if this storm can either come up the coast or if it's going to go out to sea. And that will determine whether there's a risk of snow in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic here on Saturday. That's something that we're going to watch closely here early this week to see if this storm does this and comes up the coast and brings snow to the Northeast, or if it goes more out to sea like that. So that's something that we can fine tune here over the next couple of days. But certainly something to be paying attention to in those areas here later next week, or excuse me, later this week, after we deal with a very significant snow and ice event here in the southern U.S.
This seems like a lot of overall winter weather activity in 1 week. Does this feel extraordinary for this point in January, or is this pretty standard, Dan?
So this is if it's going to happen, this is usually the time of year that it will happen. January, February, the two most wintry months for most of the United States. The exception usually the Rockies, where they typically get most of their snow in March. But in the eastern and central part of the United States, January and February are usually the coldest months of the year with the most snow and ice. So this is certainly a colder than average uh, a weather pattern with more snow than maybe is typical in 1 week, but certainly something that we see in a lot of winters. And in fact, there's been several in the last 10 years that have had even more snow than this, but this is certainly noteworthy. And it's a pretty impressive stretch of weather in terms of the cold combined with the snow and ice. It's impacting a lot of places, even farther south, that don't always get snow and ice every winter.
Dan DePodwin, AccuWeather Senior Director of Forecasting Operations, thank you so much for joining us and explaining this snowstorm. We so appreciate your time.
Happy to do it.